Good job, Jorah. Ain't no one gonna write you a letter. You know you're gonna have to wait for the sundown to investigate your stone-skinned forearm. Good job. Hey, this is Benjamin Boyce, and I have now spent almost 2 years reporting upon the Evergreen State College. It was June 11th of 2017, just after the protests, well, a couple weeks after the protests, when I was huddled in the basement of the library building, and I decided to open up my phone and begin to talk to you, the audience out there on the YouTubes. Hey, YouTube rubberneckers. My name is Benjamin Boyce. I'm coming to you live or recorded at the Evergreen College, and to prove that to you, this video will be shot in vertical video, because that is apparently the way that we record everything on this campus. And I just kind of went down this rabbit hole, and now we're at like 4 or 5 million views and a whole bunch of hours of footage. I would like to say that I'm the most prolific evergreener on record, but I don't know. So we're going to continue to shovel forth more of news from the Evergreen. Now, last Thursday night, I received emails about the possible vote of no confidence that the agenda committee was asked to put up before the faculty. The agenda committee didn't want to bring that to the faculty, and then there was some pushback from Mike Peros, and then the agenda committee met with the board of trustees on Friday, and then the agenda committee met with the faculty today, and now the latest news is that there's a meeting notice for a very special meeting of the Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees of the Evergreen State College will meet by phone. Members of the public may observe this meeting at the time and location listed above. Agenda: 1. Call to order. 2. Public comment. 3. Executive session. And then there's this double asterisk. And that's what I want to read, so we can get on to the next part of this. Double asterisk. The board will meet in executive session pursuant of RCW 42.30.1101F and G. And I looked that up, and that specific part of Washington law reads F. To receive and evaluate complaints or charges brought against a public officer or employee. However, upon the request of such officer or employee, a public hearing or a meeting open to the public shall be conducted upon such complaint or charge. G. To evaluate the qualifications of an applicant for public employment or to review the performance of a public employee. However, subject to RCW 42301404, discussion by a governing body of salaries, wages, and other conditions of employment to be generally applied within the agency shall occur in a meeting open to the public, and when a governing body elects to take final action hiring, setting the salary of an individual employee or class of employees, or discharging or disciplining an employee, that action shall be taken in a meeting open to the public. So, tomorrow at what time was it going to be at? Tomorrow at 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. in Library 3201, which is a conference room in the administration office. If I recall correctly, it's been a while since I actually went on campus. They're going to have this meeting, and people are going to call in, and then there's going to be public comment. Well, I just want to jump to the case because I have something to say. And this is somewhat of an open letter for the faculty, staff, board of trustees, the legislator, and the public of Olympia, Thurston County, and Washington State. And it's going to be titled, because I get to title what I write, The Case Against George Bridges. Let's see how this goes. On my second day of class at Evergreen, I was taken aside by a professor and was cordially asked not to be so engaged in class so as to give other students more room to be engaged themselves. Another student was singled out by the professor as someone who the professor hoped would find her voice and share it. She happened to be black, and I thought nothing of this because I had been trained by my life experience in big cities and, just being an American kid exposed to the media that I've been exposed to. I've always been trained to kind of disregard somebody's characteristics and look solely at their character. Now, that was really naive of me, and I learned better during my time at Evergreen. To continue, I still hold to that belief despite what Evergreen tried to teach me, but regardless, that afternoon, the student that I had been asked to withhold my engagement so that she could be engaged in class, that student that was singled out by the teacher took a nap during a lecture. And I looked at that and I wondered what place I had just enrolled in. Now, in the second to last week of my time at Evergreen, the professor that I had at that point gave the floor to people of a certain identity. Now, by this time, I knew which identity was privileged at Evergreen, and you can guess which identity the professor privileged. And he gave over the class to these members of this group. They proceeded to cuss and to berate myself and others, yelling at one girl in particular until she left the class in tears. As a white person, I was told my silence was violence, but when I asked for clarification, I was told to shut the fuck up. I knew enough at this point that engagement with people in this state was to no avail. I knew furthermore to record what was going on, and I've linked that in the description so you can decide for yourself if I'm using hyperbole by calling what happened in that classroom, my last class at Evergreen, a struggle session. So the first instance that I'm talking about here was my second day of class. That was where the college was at the time. A white professor wanted a white student to step aside so a black student could participate more in education. By the end of my time as an undergraduate, that attitude had mutated into all white people needing to suspend their education so that people of dark skin could express their discontent. And actually, I need to expand on that. Everybody, regardless of race, was demanded to suspend their education so that people of certain races could have grievances about their identities. That was the state of the college at that point. Everybody had to suspend their education in order for grievances to occur. Okay, so what happened not only at Evergreen. We're very special, let me tell you that, but we're not that special. However, halfway through my degree, George Bridges was elected president, and I witnessed firsthand the moment the attitude shifted from pro-color to anti-white. And it happened very rapidly. And I have this on video, furthermore. Here's my first professor stating openly and to the nods of many another in the room what she thinks about white people, their culture, and the academic tradition that the European Western culture has fostered over the centuries. Video.
Thanks, Felix. This I believe. Evergreen is a place that is as deeply implicated in perpetuating white privilege and white supremacy as any other institution. We inherited this system, and we unintentionally maintain it. We practice white privilege when white folks talk about including others. We silence voices of color when we say, I don't see race, and all lives matter. When faculty aren't trained to address dynamics of inequality in classrooms, we expose students of color to oppression, and white students can't learn to examine their own racism and white fragility. We galvanize white privilege in the form of curriculum, exalting white canons of fine art, literature, theory, and scientific thinking. More so if we don't examine how those canons are made. I believe we are capable of unlearning the habits of mind that perpetuate white privilege. What I am uncertain of is our collective will to examine those habits.
Now, my story is just one story, and you can take it or leave it, and you can decry me as having this motive or that other motive. I wanted to begin with myself before proceeding to speaking about who I believe has done more damage to the reputation and the inner workings of the college than, well, some could probably pin that on Trump, but as far as presidents go, my personal least favorite, I'm sorry to say, is George Summer Bridges. To boot, George Bridges was so weak that he allowed a raving band of racist agitators to overtake the college, round up faculty and staff, tell him what to say, how to hold his hands, and when he could urinate. Then he went on to make the entire institution so weak that a single undergraduate with a video camera and the ability to color correct his coffee-stained teeth can now bring the college to heel. And I'm speaking about myself here, and if you don't believe me, simply ask the head of marketing, Sandy Kaiser. Hi, Sandy. How you doing? What happens when one of my videos is posted online about the college? I know enough to say that meetings occur and that they start to play around with the internet to kind of get my video down there. But regardless, how is it that I, of all people, lowly me, seriously, have the power to basically force an institution of the state to course correct and to have discussions about me and to go into panic mode? And we'll get to this in just a minute because I do have an effect on the college. And how did I gain that effect? I personally believe it doesn't come down to anything special about me. It's simply about communication. The Bridges administration has broken the college's ability to share information with itself. He's created hierarchies of information where no one knows the whole story, and only those who know who to ask and get in their good graces are able to ascertain just a part of what is going on. What he's done is he's sectioned off various individuals at the college so they can't really speak about each other. I heard the student union has watched George Bridges start to give different presentations to different members of them and then told them that they can't take photos of his different presentations. His effect on the college is to cause it to not understand what is going on. And so when information breaks, it's traveling into the college from outside the college. So it goes from inside the college, outside the college, and then back into the college. And that is basically a death sentence for an institution. Furthermore, it's not even just a death sentence for the institution. It's a part of Washington state law that public institutions proceed with transparency and openness. And George Bridges has so woefully understaffed the public records department that I have public records requests that are over a year old now. There's one poor soul working in that department. Not only is it unhealthy for Evergreen that it can't communicate with itself, and not only is it borderline kind of illegal that it's not sharing information with the public, but it's absolutely probably openly unethical that George Bridges, who now has gained a house very close by the Washington state legislature, the state granted Evergreen this house, right? And he proudly touts this house that he was given. First and foremost, not to give lectures and to do community outreach, no, but to schmooze legislators.
So we acquired this building called the Lord Mansion. Has anyone had a chance to visit it? Cool, great. Just for a point of note, we did not pay one dime for that building. Not one dime. Thank goodness, because we wouldn't have. Why is it important? It's 6 blocks from the Capitol. It becomes a location where we can speak with legislators in a private space, a lovely private space. And the picture here of Jen Drake and me, you can barely see me, is with a legislator who has been very critical of the college. We have worked really hard on that relationship because, as I mentioned earlier, half of our budget comes from people, legislators, 147 of them, plus the governors, 148, who make decisions about our salaries, about the support we have. So we can use this space strategically. And one of the ways we use it is to meet with legislators and talk with them about their issues, their concerns, and their knowledge of the culture. And then we're starting a lecture series for the public so that there's Evergreen there, faculty giving lectures on a variety of topics relevant to the community. Just another way in which we can reach into the community, in which we can serve the community at a lovely space and meet with legislators and build relationships.
The state gave him a venue right next to the state so that he can get money and build relationships with the people who hold the purse strings of the public funding. And so in light of that, there should be a quid pro quo where information is going back to the public when money goes into the institution, but he's made it so everything's sectioned off. He's very good. If you go through like I have and spent hours and hours with videos, you'll notice that his speech patterns change, his tone of voice changes depending on who he's talking to and depending on the room. He's always shifting. And the way that he acts has had a great effect on the way that the institution operates and runs, and the health of the institution is forfeited by the way that he treats the institution. And then somebody like me finally gets all these connections and gets the dots and gets more information, and I put it out online, and I receive abuse from the faculty. I receive public slander from the faculty because they're stressed out. They're flipping out because they have no control over the situation. They watch the health of their organization drastically slide. And this one man is at the helm, and he has done no particular move to actually reverse course other than getting more students there by tricking them basically into this wonderful marketing land that Evergreen is, without actually going through the process of explaining why what happened in the spring of 2017 and really doing a deep self-evaluation of that. You just cover it all with a fresh thing of paint. You get as many students there as possible, and then you get as much money from the legislator as possible. So here's some of the things that I think that basically should be on the table about why George Bridges shouldn't be working there anymore. He cuts off inter-faculty communication. He demotes the role of faculty in directing the course of the college. And Evergreen was founded on a faculty-centered, not necessarily administration, but the faculty were the ones that directed the college. Right? And the administrators were there just to kind of make sure that the faculty could do their jobs. But he's reversed that. He puts his own name on something that's written by the ad department. And you might say, well, he's the leader of an organization. Don't CEOs just like have their ad department there to talk for them? Yes. In the corporate world, that's true. But if you want to be the head of an academic institution, you should live up to academic standards. And if you're going to live up to academic standards, then putting your name on somebody else's writing is literally or technically plagiarism. So he's a plagiarist. He's somebody that's broken down the communication of the college, somebody that's reversed the order of the college. And in the fact of him trying to reorganize the college, he's trying to institute a completely different order than Evergreen was built up on. And Evergreen will actually have to literally die and reboot again in order to fulfill his vision. His vision is basically infecting the way that the college already is. He's not going along with the way that the college is. He's trying to force the college to be something other than the college is. And of course, if you look at all the videos, he'll say something completely different. But if you look at his actions, that's what I see happening. He's a threat to the organization as a whole. Furthermore, he squeezes money. He spends most of his days squeezing money from the legislator. He has all these people doing all this work to get as many students to apply and to get there as possible. But where are they going? What is Evergreen? What happened in 2017 was a terrible thing. It was absolutely horrific thing. And anybody for years to come that watches that footage will have burned in their mind, this is what happens when certain ideas take root. And if you guys really wanted to tell a different story other than this is your brain on social justice activism, then you guys need to make that story. But the fact is that George has not allowed the faculty themselves, and furthermore, the faculty themselves have not made the effort and the work to get together and to really do a very critical, hard self-evaluation. And that begs the question, why would students go to a place that touts the ability to teach them to learn how to do a self-evaluation if that place can't do a self-evaluation for its own self? If you guys want to provide an education that students want, you need to actually live up and really genuinely show that you stand by the values that you purport to stand by. And I believe that a lot of people at Evergreen actually hold those values, but George Bridges, as a representative of the organization, sends the wrong message. You see somebody who is weak and who furthermore runs something really shoddily, who furthermore, if you actually look at his administration, you're always like, what's actually going on? And this is actually a complaint I've heard about him from previous jobs that he's has. Everybody doesn't really know what's going on. He always keeps people in the dark, and then he springs a new plan on them. That's not the image that Evergreen needs to send. And I heard the argument that if George leaves, well, they're going to have to go through all this work to find another president. I just want to say, I'm sure there are people out there that look at Evergreen and look at its situation and say, that is a challenge. I'm going to turn this college around, and I want turning that college around on my life story. There are people that are qualified, that are out there, that are totally willing to do it. So if you're scared of the power vacuum that's going to happen when George Bridges leaves the game of Evergreen Thrones, don't be. Things are going to happen. But the course that he's going along with the college is certain death. It's utter certain death, because eventually the legislator, which is not all Democrat, is going to get wise and say, listen, we're sending millions and millions of dollars to this college, and we don't really trust this administration. And furthermore, if you really look at what they're teaching students, you're like, well, there's a lot of kind of racist things that they're teaching students. It's that whole structure of curdled progressivism, of what's called grievance studies, which is really hard to break down. And that's a whole other conversation. But until we actually can have that conversation, nothing can really go forward. And the reputation of Evergreen's not going to change until we can actually confront that conversation. And George Bridges is making it impossible for us to actually have that conversation. And maybe a lot of people don't want to have that conversation, because to question that system of belief might lead to other questions, and might lead to you actually saying, actually, I don't believe this whole thing that I spent a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and made a big made a big public show of myself as an adherent to this belief system, if it turns out that this belief system doesn't actually work in the long term or in the large scale. But the fact remains is that George Bridges is not the person to lead the college down the path of being able to actually reckon with what happened there and set an example of how to actually go through a crisis and then put yourself back together again. Somebody contacted me, a student from another college, and actually a college level course on leadership used George Bridges and his handling of the Evergreen Spring as a case study on what not to do during a crisis. And actually, if you guys honestly go and look at the internet, you'll see that the first time that anything kind of weird starts to happen that threatens an academic institution, the first question on a lot of people's mind is that Evergreen? Is this another Evergreen? You guys don't understand. The way that Evergreen is seen right now is intimately linked, not just to the protesters, but to George Bridges and the way that he acted during the protests. One more thing, and then I got to wrap this up because I didn't mean to go off script like this. One more thing. I heard recently that Evergreen tried to hire a new police chief, and they have 3 applicants come. 2 of those applicants dropped out at the last minute. I don't know what happened to the third, but those 2 dropped out, so that the hiring pool is really difficult for them. Stacey Brown left a year and a half ago, right? They haven't been able to find a new police chief. And I have to say, this is another reason why you guys don't want George Bridges. George Bridges subjected his police chief on the May 23rd of 2017 to a very dangerous situation. He ordered her to come not in uniform and unarmed to a room filled with basically frothing at the mouth, bloodthirsty protesters. And in this crowded room with one exit, there was another exit, but not a lot of people know about it, and I'm pretty sure it was blocked, knowing the building. She was subjected to ridicule, to shame, to a bunch of threats, and nothing really happened. But the next day, Stacey Brown, the chief of police, she wrote a memo to George Bridges telling him that another event was going to happen and he needed to suspend operations for the day. And if George Bridges had suspended operations for the day, we would not have footage of students kidnapping faculty and staff. We would not have the incidents of staff with mental disabilities being harassed by protesters, of staff being sequestered in rooms, of Naima Lowe blowing up on the Red Square. We wouldn't have all that. George Bridges willfully put the college in another situation just like that, ignoring the advice of his chief of police. So she was given all the responsibility if something bad happened, but none of the authority to thwart the bad thing happening. So George Bridges is not going to be trusted by anybody. No police chief is really going to trust this guy. So you guys are going to have a security deficit right now. And I think the public should know that the relationship between George Bridges and the chief of police during the protest was abhorrent and put a lot of students at way more risk than needed to happen, right? So that's an open letter specifically to the faculty, the Board of Trustees, the state legislator, and this is Benjamin Boyce. I am going to edit this down and post it to the internet, and we'll see what happens tomorrow. Y'all have a good night.